Picture this: a woman who danced through the dazzling chaos of mid-20th century America, her pen as sharp as her wit, her life as colorful as the headlines she wrote. Doris Lilly was no ordinary storyteller. She was a journalist, author, and socialite who didn't just report on the wealthy and powerful. She lived among them, weaving their stories into narratives that captivated a nation. Born in California's sunlit sprawl, Doris rubbed elbows with Hollywood stars, romanced a future president, and penned books that taught women how to navigate the glittering world of high society. Her name might not shine as brightly as Marilyn Monroe's or Truman Capote's, but her insights into the elite's joys and sorrows remain timeless. For an audience that loves history, biography, and the drama of real lives, Doris's story is a treasure trove of ambition, heartbreak, and humanity. Let's journey through her life, from her humble beginnings to her enduring legacy, and uncover the woman who saw through the glamour to the fragile hearts beneath. Early life and childhood, 1920s to 1930s. Doris Lilly was born on December 26, 1926, in the quiet town of South Pasadena, California, a place that embodied the gentle suburban charm of early 20th century America. Nestled in the San Gabriel Valley, South Pasadena was known for its tree-lined streets, Victorian homes, and a sense of community that felt worlds away from the bustling chaos of nearby Los Angeles. Yet some historical records playfully flirt with alternative birth years, suggesting 1921 or even 1922, and occasionally shifting her birthplace to the heart of Los Angeles itself. This slight uncertainty in the details of her origins adds a layer of intrigue to Doris's story, much like the enigmatic personas she would later chronicle in her writings about high society. It reflects a woman who, throughout her life, thrived on blending fact with a touch of allure, turning everyday narratives into something more captivating and mysterious. For Doris, facts were not rigid. They were flexible tools in the art of storytelling, a skill that would define her career as a journalist and author. Raised in a solidly middle-class family, Doris spent her formative years in Santa Monica, a coastal gem where the salty breeze off the Pacific Ocean carried the promise of adventure and opportunity. Santa Monica in the 1920s was a vibrant mosaic of life, with its iconic pier serving as a hub of activity. The pier, built in 1909 and expanded over the years, featured amusement rides that spun with gleeful abandon, fishermen casting lines into the sparkling waves, and tourists from across the country flocking to experience the California dream. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter, the creak of wooden planks underfoot, and the distant roar of the ocean, creating an atmosphere that was both exhilarating and grounding. Doris's family home, likely a modest craftsman bungalow typical of the era's architecture, stood as a bastion of stability amid this lively backdrop. These bungalows, with their low-pitched roofs, exposed beams, and inviting front porches, were emblematic of the American middle class's aspirations. Practical, yet aspirational, blending functionality with a hint of aesthetic charm. On that porch, neighbors might gather to share stories of distant relatives striking it rich in the oil fields, or tales of Hollywood sightings, fostering a community spirit that Doris would carry with her. The 1920s, often dubbed the Roaring Twenties, were a time of exuberance and transformation in Southern California. The region was exploding with innovation and excess, as Hollywood rapidly evolved from scattered orange groves and dusty lots into the undisputed epicenter of global entertainment. Silent films dominated the silver screen, drawing massive crowds to opulent theaters like Grauman's Chinese Theater, which opened in 1927 with its exotic architecture and celebrity handprints immortalized in cement. Icons such as Charlie Chaplin, with his tramp character embodying both humor and pathos, and Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart known for her curls and innocent charm, became household names, symbolizing the era's blend of whimsy and ambition. Radio waves crackled with the infectious rhythms of jazz, broadcast from stations like KHJ in Los Angeles, bringing the sounds of Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong into homes across the state. For young Doris, this cultural whirlwind was impossible to ignore. Growing up just a stone's throw from the studios, she might have heard whispers of film shoots happening nearby, or caught the occasional glimpse of a production crew setting up in the streets. The era's fashion, flapper dresses with fringes that swayed to the Charleston, cloche hats, and bobbed haircuts, represented a rebellion against the restrictive norms of the past, empowering women to embrace freedom and self-expression. But beneath this glittering surface of prosperity and progress, the era harbored deep shadows that would profoundly shape Doris's worldview. The stock market crash of October 1929 marked the abrupt end of the Roaring Twenties, plunging the United States into the Great Depression, a period of widespread economic despair that lasted throughout the 1930s. California, despite its image as a land of opportunity, was hit particularly hard. Unemployment rates soared to over 25% in some areas, factories shuttered, and banks failed en masse, leaving families destitute. Shanty towns, derogatorily called Hoovervilles, after President Herbert Hoover, sprang up on the outskirts of cities, makeshift communities of cardboard boxes and tin sheets where the homeless sought shelter. In Los Angeles County alone, thousands lost their homes, and bread lines stretched for blocks in downtown areas. The influx of Dust Bowl migrants from the Midwest, farmers fleeing the drought-ravaged plains of Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, added to the social tension. These Okies, as they were often pejoratively labeled, arrived in battered Model T Fords, their faces weathered by hardship, seeking work in California's agricultural fields or urban centers. Their presence highlighted the stark contrasts within the state. While Beverly Hills mansions hosted lavish parties attended by movie moguls like Louis B. Mayer, the migrants toiled for meager wages, living in squalid camps. Prohibition, in force from 1920 until its repeal in 1933, further complicated the social landscape. The ban on alcohol fueled a thriving underground economy of speakeasies and bootleggers, where jazz bands played late into the night and flappers sipped illicit gin cocktails. In Santa Monica, hidden bars might have operated behind unassuming storefronts, adding an element of excitement and danger to everyday life. Doris's family, anchored in middle-class stability, felt the economic pinch but managed to avoid the direst consequences. Perhaps her father worked in a steady job, maybe in real estate or a local business, that provided enough to keep food on the table and the roof overhead. Meals might have been simple: beans, bread, and occasional treats from the local market. Yet this relative security allowed Doris to observe the world's inequalities without being fully engulfed by them. She witnessed neighbors losing jobs, homes foreclosed upon, and children her age forced to leave school to contribute to family incomes. These experiences instilled in her a deep resilience, a quality that would later manifest in her unflinching portrayals of high society's underbelly. At Santa Monica High School, Doris emerged as a bright and curious student, her mind eager to absorb the lessons of both the classroom and the world outside. The school, established in 1891 and known for its strong academic programs, was a melting pot of influences. With students from diverse backgrounds, sharing stories of their family's struggles and dreams. Its location, less than 20 miles from the Paramount Pictures lot, meant that the glow of Hollywood was ever present, seeping into daily life. Doris might have participated in school plays or writing clubs, honing the storytelling skills that would become her trademark. Teachers likely encouraged her inquisitive nature, assigning readings from classic literature or discussions on current events, like the New Deal policies under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which began to bring relief through programs like the Works Progress Administration WPA. The WPA funded public works in California, including murals and theaters, injecting a sense of hope into the community. Cultural icons of the time left an indelible mark on young Doris. She could have idolized Clara Bow, the it girl whose vivacious energy and scandalous reputation captured the Jazz Age's spirit in films like It, 1927. The shift from silent films to talkies in the late 1920s revolutionized the industry, amplifying voices like Jean Harlow's sultry tones in movies such as Hell's Angels, 1930. Doris absorbed these shifts, from the beaded dresses and feather boas of flapper fashion to the groundbreaking feats of Amelia Earhart, whose 1932 solo transatlantic flight symbolized women's growing independence. Earhart's daring adventures, reported breathlessly in newspapers, inspired girls like Doris to dream beyond traditional roles. Similarly, Zelda Fitzgerald's writings, including her essay Eulogy on the Flapper, critiqued societal expectations and celebrated hedonism, while Eleanor Roosevelt's advocacy for social reform through her newspaper columns and radio broadcasts highlighted women's potential in public life. These figures shaped a generation eager to break free from Victorian constraints, planting seeds of ambition in Doris's mind. Doris's keen observational skills developed early, a trait that would serve her well in her future career as a society columnist. Walking the streets of Santa Monica, she noticed the stark divide between the wealthy elite and the struggling masses. In Pasadena, just a short drive away, Grand Estates hosted lavish parties where guests arrived in chauffeured Packards, sipping champagne under crystal chandeliers. Meanwhile, in downtown Los Angeles, families lined up at soup kitchens run by charities like the Salvation Army, their faces etched with worry. Friends and family recalled Doris as spirited and outgoing, with a quick laugh that could lighten the heaviest moods, and a knack for storytelling that turned ordinary events into captivating tales. She might have entertained siblings or classmates with imitations of movie stars, or invented adventures inspired by the films she saw. These traits helped her navigate the era's uncertainties, from economic instability to the growing rumors of war in Europe. The Great Depression taught Doris resilience in profound ways. Families bartered goods, grew victory gardens, even before the war, and made do with what they had, mending clothes, reusing materials, and finding joy in simple pleasures like picnics on the beach. Hollywood's allure provided a counterbalance, sparking her ambition. The studios churned out escapist fare, like Busby Berkeley's elaborate musicals with synchronized dancers in Gold Diggers of 1933, offering audiences a temporary reprieve from reality. Doris likely dreamed of that world, imagining herself amid the glamour, a seed that would grow into her brief acting career and lifelong fascination with the elite. By the late 1930s, as World War II loomed on the horizon, Doris was a teenager ready to chase her dreams. Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 sent shockwaves across the globe, and America began mobilizing, with defense industries ramping up in California. The state's promise, work hard, aim high, and you might join the ranks of the successful, became her guiding star. Doris saw California not just as a place, but as a mindset, a land where reinvention was possible, where a middle-class girl from Santa Monica could aspire to mingle with the gods of glamour. These formative years, a potent blend of grit from economic hardship and the seductive pull of Hollywood's glamour, set the stage for a life dedicated to decoding society's undercurrents. She learned early that behind every facade of wealth and success lay stories of struggle, resilience, and human frailty, themes that would echo through her writings. Her childhood wasn't solely defined by surviving hardship. It was equally about dreaming big and finding wonder in the everyday. Weekends might have been spent at the beach, where Doris watched surfers ride the waves at Malibu or built sandcastles with friends, the sun warming her skin as seagulls wheeled overhead. She could have sneaked into matinee showings at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, a cozy venue screening the latest hits for a dime, losing herself in the adventures of Shirley Temple or the romances of Clark Gable and Carole Lombard. The Depression's personal toll was evident all around. Neighbors evicted from homes, turning to relatives for shelter, classmates dropping out of school to sell newspapers or shine shoes on street corners. These sights sharpened her awareness of class divides, teaching her that wealth wasn't merely about money but about security, access, and the ability to weather storms. Yet Hollywood's persistent escapism offered a beacon of hope. Films like The Wizard of Oz, 1939, with its technicolor dreams and message of inner strength, resonated deeply in a time of uncertainty. Doris's middle-class roots provided a stable foundation, regular meals, education, and family support, but the proximity to wealth fueled her curiosity. Driving past the gated communities of Bel Air or hearing stories of studio parties, she pondered the lives of the elite. What secrets did they hide? How did they maintain their poise amid chaos? This curiosity would evolve into her journalistic eye, always probing beneath the surface. By 1939, Doris was on the cusp of adulthood, her teenage years marked by a blend of innocence and awakening. High school dances, first crushes, and academic achievements filled her days, while global events like the outbreak of World War II cast long shadows. California's defense industry began booming, with aircraft factories in Los Angeles hiring women, foreshadowing the Rosie the Riveter era. For Doris, this shift represented opportunity, a chance to step beyond Santa Monica's shores into a wider world. Entry into Hollywood and acting, 1940s. The 1940s thrust Doris Lilly into the whirlwind of Hollywood, a decade profoundly marked by the dual forces of wartime sacrifice and the shimmering promise of post-war renewal. As the world grappled with the horrors of World War II, America found solace and inspiration in its film industry, which became a vital tool for morale-boosting propaganda and escapist entertainment. For young Doris, now in her late teens and bursting with the ambition cultivated during her Depression-era childhood in Santa Monica, this era represented a tantalizing gateway to glamour and opportunity. She signed on as a contract player for the legendary Cecil B. DeMille, a towering figure in cinema whose grandiose epics had long defined the spectacle of the silver screen. DeMille's earlier masterpieces, such as the silent version of the Ten Commandments from 1923, with its biblical scale and innovative special effects, and Cleopatra in 1934, starring Claudette Colbert in a role that oozed exotic allure, had set the standard for Hollywood's ambition. His films were not mere stories, they were events, blending historical drama with moralistic undertones, and they required armies of actors, technicians, and visionaries to bring them to life. The studio system of the time was a well-oiled machine, a rigid hierarchy that dominated Hollywood from the 1920s through the 1940s. Major studios like Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, and 20th Century Fox controlled every aspect of a star's career, from image to personal life. Young actors like Doris were bound by long-term contracts that promised steady work, but demanded unwavering loyalty and endurance. These contracts often locked performers into grueling schedules, 6 days a week from dawn until dusk, and relegated newcomers to minor roles designed to hone their craft while testing their mettle. For Doris, this was a golden ticket to the industry's beating heart, albeit one that came with its share of demands and disillusionments. As a contract player, she was part of a vast pool of talent, expected to appear in whatever role the studio assigned, whether it was a bit part in a crowd scene or a fleeting appearance as background color. It was a system that built stars like Bette Davis or Clark Gable, but broke many others, fostering a competitive environment where survival depended on talent, luck, and adaptability. The Paramount Pictures lot in the early 1940s was a bustling hive of activity, a self-contained world where dreams were manufactured on an industrial scale. Sprawling across acres in the heart of Hollywood, the lot featured massive sound stages that loomed like warehouses, each one a portal to different eras and adventures. Extras in elaborate period costumes, Roman tunics, Victorian gowns, or military uniforms darted between sets, their faces painted with the excitement of the make-believe. Directors barked orders through megaphones, their voices echoing off the high ceilings, while cameramen maneuvered massive equipment on dollies and cranes. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint from newly constructed sets, the acrid smoke from arc lights, and the underlying hum of ambition that pulsed through every conversation. Script girls clutched clipboards, noting every detail, while producers paced with cigars in hand, negotiating deals that could make or break careers. For a newcomer like Doris, stepping onto this lot must have felt like entering a parallel universe, where the ordinary rules of life gave way to the magic of movie making. World War II profoundly shaped Hollywood's output during this period, transforming the industry into a patriotic powerhouse. With the United States entering the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, films became vehicles for boosting morale, recruiting soldiers, and promoting unity. Studios produced propaganda pieces that glorified American heroism, such as Mrs. Miniver, 1942, which depicted British resilience against Nazi bombings, or Yankee Doodle Dandy, 1942, a musical biopic of George M. Cohan, starring James Cagney. Iconic films like Casablanca, 1942, with Humphrey Bogart's cynical Rick Blaine and Ingrid Bergman's luminous Ilsa Lund, masterfully blended romance, intrigue, and anti-fascist sentiment, ending with the memorable line about the beginning of a beautiful friendship. These movies not only entertained but also reinforced the nation's resolve, often featuring stars who volunteered for service or participated in bond drives. Doris, young and eager amid this fervor, landed her uncredited role as a civilian in DeMille's 1944 war drama, The Story of Dr. Wassel. The film, based on the real-life exploits of Navy surgeon Corridon M. Wassel, who heroically evacuated wounded soldiers from Java during the Japanese invasion, starred Gary Cooper in the lead role. Cooper, with his stoic, all-American demeanor, embodied the quiet heroism that resonated with wartime audiences. Doris's part in the film was likely fleeting, perhaps nothing more than a face in a crowd during tense evacuation scenes, where panicked civilians fled amid explosions and chaos simulated by pyrotechnics, and fog machines. She might have been dressed in simple, era-appropriate attire, a modest cotton dress, practical shoes for running on set, and her hair styled in the popular victory rolls that symbolized women's contribution to the war effort. Despite its brevity, the role immersed her deeply in the craft of filmmaking. Shooting under wartime constraints added layers of realism and hardship. Resources were rationed due to government mandates, with rubber, metal, and fabric in short supply. Sets were often recycled from previous productions, perhaps a jungle facade from an earlier adventure film repurposed for the Java sequences, and costumes were mended and reused to conserve materials. DeMille's perfectionism was legendary. Known as the master of the epic, he demanded take after take until every gesture, every line, met his exacting standards. He would stride across the set in his signature riding breeches and boots, his voice booming commands that instilled both fear and respect. For Doris, this was a first-hand education in the discipline required behind the glamour, the endless rehearsals, the physical toll of standing for hours under hot lights, and the emotional investment in even the smallest roles. Acting, however, wasn't ultimately Doris's calling, though it provided invaluable lessons that would inform her later work. The studio system, for all its promises, was brutal and unforgiving. Contract players like her earned meager wages, perhaps $75 a week for beginners, while working exhaustive hours that left little room for personal life. Schedules were relentless. Early call times at 6 a.m., makeup and wardrobe sessions, then shooting until sunset or beyond, often without overtime pay. There was scant creative control. Roles were assigned based on studio needs, not actor preferences, leading to typecasting that could pigeonhole performers for years. Women in particular faced additional pressures in this male-dominated world. Objectification was rampant, with actresses expected to conform to beauty standards enforced by studio bosses. Diets, exercise regimens, and even surgical alterations were common. Starlets like Lana Turner, discovered at a soda fountain and catapulted to fame in They Won't Forget, 1937, navigated careers as sweater girls or femme fatales, their images carefully curated for male gaze appeal. Rita Hayworth, dubbed the Love Goddess, endured grueling transformations, including electrolysis to raise her hairline to fit the exotic bombshell mold in films like Gilda, 1946. Doris, with her sharp observational eye honed from childhood, saw through the facade. She found the behind-the-scenes drama far more compelling than the spotlight. The whispered deals struck in dimly lit studio commissaries over coffee and sandwiches, where agents haggled for better parts. The rivalries among starlets vying for the same role, fueled by jealousy and ambition. And the power plays of producers like DeMille, who wielded influence like a scepter, deciding fates with a single nod. Her time under DeMille's wing offered a masterclass in the mechanics of fame, from the intimate details of script readings, where actors dissected dialogue in smoke-filled rooms, to the extravagant premiere galas. At theaters like Grauman's, where flashbulbs popped like fireworks, capturing celebrities in their finery. These events were social spectacles, with limousines lining Hollywood Boulevard and fans clamoring behind ropes for autographs. Doris might have attended such premieres as a minor player, rubbing shoulders with established stars and absorbing the rituals of red carpet glamour. Yet beneath the excitement lay the industry's darker side, the pressure to maintain a pristine public image, enforced by morality clauses in contracts that could terminate careers over scandals, the exploitation of young talent, with long hours leading to exhaustion and burnout, and the gender imbalances that favored men in pay, roles, and decision-making. Doris's experiences here echoed the contradictions she had observed in her youth, the allure of wealth and fame clashing with the human costs. As the war drew to a close in 1945, with the Allied victories in Europe and the Pacific culminating in Japan's surrender after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, America's collective mood shifted from sacrifice to celebration. Soldiers returned home by the millions, sparking a baby boom that would reshape society and an economic surge fueled by pent-up consumer demand. Factories that had produced tanks and planes pivoted to cars and appliances, ushering in an era of prosperity. Hollywood mirrored this transition, moving away from war-themed dramas toward genres that celebrated normalcy and optimism. Film noir emerged as a gritty response to post-war disillusionment, with shadowy tales of crime and moral ambiguity in movies like The Maltese Falcon, 1941, but influential into the decade, or Double Indemnity, 1944. Meanwhile, Technicolor musicals like Meet Me in St. Louis, Louis, 1944, directed by Vincente Minnelli and starring Judy Garland, evoked nostalgic family life with songs and dances that lifted spirits. The industry also faced new challenges. The rise of television as a rival medium, with early shows like the Texaco Star Theater, hosted by Milton Berle, drawing families to living rooms instead of theaters. By 1948, television sets were in over 1 million homes, broadcasting variety acts, news, and dramas that competed directly with cinema. Doris, now in her early 20s and reflecting on her brief stint in acting, felt the allure of the screen fading. The role in The Story of Dr. Wassel had been a thrill, but the lack of control, waiting for assignments, enduring rejections, and conforming to type, didn't align with her independent spirit. She craved storytelling on her own terms, where she could wield the pen rather than follow a director's cue. Leveraging the connections she had made, fellow actors, producers, and insiders from the Paramount lot, she began transitioning toward journalism and writing. Her insider's perspective became a unique asset. She understood the industry's inner workings, the egos, the illusions, and the genuine talents that made it tick. This decade, with its blend of global conflict and domestic rebirth, forged Doris's resilience and sharpened her eye for human drama. It was a crucible that tested her, revealing that her true strength lay not in performing stories, but in observing and articulating them, setting the stage for her prolific literary career in the decades to follow. Her experience with DeMille, in particular, served as a vivid window into the true cost of stardom. The story of Dr. Wassel demanded authenticity in every frame, drawing from President Roosevelt's own radio address praising Wassel's heroism. Doris might have donned 1940s civilian attire for her scenes, simple blouses tucked into skirts, sensible flats for navigating the set's mock rubble, and her hair pinned in victory rolls, a hairstyle popularized by women working in factories to keep locks out of machinery while symbolizing victory abroad. Blending into the ensemble during chaotic evacuation sequences, she would have acted out fear and urgency under DeMille's watchful eye, perhaps repeating lines or gestures until perfection was achieved. Gary Cooper's charisma left a lasting impression. His understated performance as the steadfast doctor embodied the heroic ideal that Americans clung to during uncertain times. DeMille's exacting standards, insisting on historical accuracy, from props sourced from military surplus to accents coached by experts, taught Doris the meticulous art of creation. The war's impact was tangible on set and beyond. Gas rationing limited travel, so cast and crew carpooled or used studio buses. Food shortages meant commissary meals were sparse, with meatless days and victory gardens on the lot providing fresh produce. Studios actively supported the war effort, donating profits to bond drives and hosting USO shows where stars like Bob Hope entertained troops. Doris's minor role gifted her with stories that would enrich her later writing. The camaraderie among extras sharing cigarettes during breaks, the thrill of late-night shoots under blackout conditions to avoid air raid drills, and the quiet moments of reflection when newsreels brought the front lines closer. Leaving acting was a pragmatic choice. She recognized her preference for analyzing the machinery of fame, the contract negotiations, the publicity stunts, the personal sacrifices, over chasing it herself. The post-war boom opened new horizons, with suburbs like Levittown sprouting across the landscape and consumerism soaring through innovations like frozen foods and washing machines. Hollywood adapted, but Doris saw the writing on the wall. The studio system's cracks were showing, with antitrust lawsuits looming that would end the monopolies by 1948. Magazines and newspapers beckoned as platforms where she could shine, her voice unfiltered by directors or scripts. This period in the 1940s, from the intensity of wartime production to the optimism of peace, was transformative for Doris. It honed her into a keen observer of life's contradictions, the glamour masking exhaustion, the heroism hiding vulnerability, and prepared her to chronicle the elite with the empathy and insight that would define her legacy. Transition to writing, first book and early career, 1950s. By the 1950s, Doris Lilly had fully embraced the world of writing, making a deliberate and empowering shift away from the unpredictable chaos of Hollywood's acting scene toward the structured control of crafting her own narratives. This decade in American history was a golden era of post-war prosperity, a time when the nation was healing from the scars of World War II and stepping into a future brimming with optimism and opportunity. The economy was booming, fueled by technological advancements, a surge in manufacturing, and government programs like the GI Bill, which provided veterans with education, low-interest home loans, and unemployment benefits. Suburbs sprawled outward from cities like wildfire, with developments such as Levittown in New York becoming symbols of the new middle-class dream. Affordable homes with white picket fences, manicured lawns, and two-car garages. Television sets began glowing in living rooms across the country, bringing shows like I Love Lucy and The Ed Sullivan Show into homes, transforming entertainment from a communal theater experience to a private family affair. The American dream, once a vague aspiration during the Depression and war years, now promised tangible upward mobility, a steady job, a nuclear family, and the luxuries of modern life like refrigerators, washing machines, and shiny new automobiles rolling off assembly lines in Detroit. It was an age of consumerism, where advertisements in glossy magazines touted everything from vacuum cleaners to canned soups as essential to the good life. For women in particular, the era presented a complex landscape, returning to domestic roles after wartime factory work, yet subtly challenging those norms through emerging media and literature. Doris's debut book, How to Meet a Millionaire, published in 1951 by the respected New York house G.P. Putnam's Sons, perfectly captured this post-war zeitgeist of ambition, aspiration, and a touch of playful irreverence. At 182 pages, the book was a compact yet lively guide aimed primarily at women who dreamed of elevating their social and economic status through savvy romantic pursuits. It wasn't a dry self-help manual. Instead, it brimmed with cheeky practical advice that felt like a confidential chat with a worldly girlfriend over cocktails. Doris encouraged readers to frequent elite haunts where the wealthy congregated, such as New York's legendary Stork Club, a glamorous nightclub opened in 1929 by ex-bootlegger Sherman Billingsley, where celebrities like Frank Sinatra and socialites sipped martinis under crystal chandeliers. Or she suggested escapes to Palm Springs resorts in California, those sun-drenched oases favored by Hollywood royalty like Clark Gable and Carole Lombard, where poolsides buzzed with deal-making tycoons. Her tips on presentation were spot on for the era's fashion sensibilities. Dress elegantly, but not ostentatiously. Think tailored suits inspired by Christian Dior's new look silhouette, with nipped waists and full skirts that exuded femininity without screaming for attention. Accessories should be understated, perhaps a string of pearls or a simple handbag, to convey class rather than desperation. Mastering the art of charm was central to Doris's philosophy, and she emphasized doing so without seeming overly eager, which could scare off potential suitors. A standout line from the book encapsulated her witty, observational style. Millionaires are marrying their secretaries because they are so busy making money they haven't time to see other girls. This quip was a clever nod to the era's social climbing dynamics, where proximity to power, whether in an office setting or at exclusive events, often trumped traditional notions of romance. In the 1950s, as corporate America expanded with companies like IBM and General Electric leading the charge, executives were indeed consumed by work, building empires in boardrooms, while their personal lives revolved around efficient, familiar companions. Doris's insight drew from her own brushes with Hollywood's elite, where she had witnessed similar patterns among producers and stars. The book painted a picture of wealth not as an unattainable fortress, but as a navigable landscape where strategic positioning could lead to life-changing connections. Chapters delved into specific venues and scenarios, such as attending polo matches at clubs like the Meadowbrook Polo Club on Long Island, where the thundering hooves and cheering crowds provided a backdrop for mingling with old money families. Or charity galas, those black tie affairs raising funds for causes like the March of Dimes, where donors in tuxedos and gowns networked under the guise of philanthropy. Etiquette advice was woven throughout, with Doris stressing the importance of subtlety, a well-timed compliment on a man's business acumen rather than his looks, or a subtle smile that invited conversation without demanding it. She encouraged learning social graces like proper table manners, knowing which fork to use at a formal dinner, or even picking up hobbies favored by the wealthy, such as bridge, a card game popular in upscale circles that required strategy and poise. Her prose was delightfully conversational, as if she were leaning in across a cafe table sharing secrets with a wink. She avoided cynicism, opting instead for an upbeat tone that celebrated the fun of the chase, while acknowledging the realities of gender dynamics in a patriarchal society. This approach made the book accessible and empowering, subtly suggesting that women could exercise agency in a male-dominated world. Years before Betty Friedan's groundbreaking The Feminine Mystique, in 1963 critiqued the stifling roles of housewives and sparked the second-wave feminist movement, Doris was offering a form of quiet rebellion, encouraging women to pursue financial security and excitement on their own terms rather than waiting passively for suitors. The book was an immediate hit, flying off shelves and resonating deeply with readers who were enchanted by the era's rampant consumerism. In a time when Cadillacs with tail fins parked in the driveways of Levittown's cookie-cutter homes symbolized success, And department stores like Macy's showcased Dior's revolutionary new look, dresses that emphasized hourglass figures with yards of fabric. Doris's guide tapped into a collective fantasy of luxury. Women across the country, from secretaries in Manhattan high-rises to housewives in Midwestern towns, devoured its pages, dreaming of escaping mundane routines for a life of opulence. Book clubs buzzed with discussions. Beauty parlors echoed with quotes shared over hair dryers, and fan letters poured in, praising Doris for her relatable voice. She drew heavily on her Hollywood days for authenticity, weaving in anecdotes about tycoons she had encountered. Perhaps a studio executive's penchant for collecting art or a starlet's clever way of networking at parties. These personal touches elevated the book beyond mere advice, turning it into a window on a glamorous world that felt attainable with the right strategy. Doris's fascination with influential families like the Rockefellers added depth. She referenced their philanthropy and social circles as models for aspiration, noting how figures like John D. Rockefeller Jr. balanced immense wealth with public service. The book's success wasn't just commercial, it sold briskly, earning Doris a reputation as a fresh voice in lifestyle writing, but cultural, influencing how women viewed their roles in society. It subtly empowered them by framing marriage not as submission, but as a calculated partnership, where intelligence and charm were as valuable as beauty. This was revolutionary in an era when women's magazines like Ladies' Home Journal promoted domestic bliss. Yet Doris hinted at broader horizons, aligning with the shifting sands of gender norms. The legacy of Rosie the Riveter lingered from the war years, when women had proven their capabilities in factories and offices, and Doris's works built on that, encouraging independence through social savvy. A persistent myth, however, shadowed the book's legacy, tying How to Meet a Millionaire to the 1953 film How to Marry a Millionaire, a frothy Technicolor comedy starring Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, and Lauren Bacall. Directed by Gene Negulesco and produced by 20th Century Fox, the movie followed three glamorous models who rent a luxurious New York apartment to scheme their way into wealthy marriages, complete with mistaken identities, romantic mix-ups, and a soundtrack of witty banter. Monroe's Pola, the nearsighted beauty who refuses to wear glasses around men, Grable's Loco, the street-smart gold digger, and Bacall's Schatza, the pragmatic leader, embodied the era's blend of femininity and cunning. Shot in vibrant cinemascope, the film was a box office success, grossing millions and cementing Monroe's status as a sex symbol. Yet despite the strikingly similar titles and themes, the movie was based on two separate plays. Zoe Akins's The Greeks Had a Word for It, 1930, and Dale Unson and Catherine Albert's Loco, 1946, not Doris's book. The screenplay by Nunnally Johnson adapted these sources into a modern fairy tale, emphasizing humor over practical advice. The mix-up likely stemmed from the title's resemblance and the shared cultural fascination with gold-digging narratives, a trope popularized in earlier films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, also starring Monroe. Hollywood's knack for blurring truth with fiction amplified the confusion. Studios often loosely adapted books without credit, and publicists spun stories to generate buzz. This misconception clung stubbornly to Doris's legacy, even appearing in her obituaries from prestigious outlets like the New York Times and Los Angeles Times, which erroneously linked the two, perhaps to add a dash of cinematic glamour to her story. It was a testament to the era's media landscape, where facts could twist like plot lines in a screwball comedy, and myths endured longer than realities. Doris, with her insider knowledge from her acting days, likely viewed this with amusement, recognizing it as another layer of the fame game she had escaped. Doris's writing stood out for its warmth and accessibility, making the often intimidating dynamics of elite society feel approachable and human. Unlike the venomous gossip peddled by contemporaries like Hedda Hopper, whose syndicated column in the Los Angeles Times dripped with scandal and innuendo, ruining careers with a single barbed remark, Doris opted for a kinder, more insightful tone. Hopper, with her flamboyant hats and ruthless reporting, represented the old guard of Hollywood journalism, where power came from fear. Doris, in contrast, humanized her subjects, revealing quirks that made them relatable. A tycoon's secret love for jazz records, spinning Duke Ellington on his phonograph after board meetings, or a starlet's hidden insecurities about her background, masked by designer gowns. This approach emerged amid the chill of McCarthyism, the anti-communist hysteria led by Senator Joseph McCarthy, which gripped Hollywood in the early 1950s. The House Un-American Activities Committee hearings blacklisted writers, directors, and actors suspected of leftist ties, creating an atmosphere of paranoia where free speech was stifled. Political discourse was sidelined, but society columns and gossip offered safe commentary, focusing on personal lives rather than ideologies. Doris navigated this carefully, her work providing escapism through tales of luxury and romance. The 1950s also marked Doris's foray into television, a medium exploding in popularity with over 15 million sets in American homes by mid-decade. Notably, she appeared as a self-panelist on Guess What in 1952, a quiz show hosted by Dick Calmer that aired on the Dumont Television Network. The program featured panelists guessing occupations or secrets based on clues, blending humor with light-hearted competition. Doris's charm, a perfect blend of Hollywood glamour and down-to-earth grit, captivated audiences, her quick wit and poised demeanor making her a natural on camera. She might have shared anecdotes from her acting days or offered sly observations on society, endearing her to viewers who saw her as both aspirational and relatable. This exposure expanded her reach beyond print, positioning her as a multifaceted commentator in an era when TV personalities like Lucille Ball redefined women's roles on screen. Personal life, romance with Ronald Reagan, 1950s. Doris Lilly's personal life in the 1950s became unexpectedly intertwined with the threads of American history through a fleeting yet profoundly impactful romance with Ronald Reagan, a man who would later ascend to the highest office in the land. This period marked a time of transition for both individuals, as Doris was carving out her path from Hollywood's fringes into the world of writing and journalism, while Reagan was grappling with the remnants of a crumbling marriage and a fading career in the spotlight. Fresh off his highly publicized 1949 divorce from actress Jane Wyman, Reagan, still best known for his charismatic roles in films like Knut Rockne, All-American, where he portrayed the legendary football player George Gipp with that famous line, "Win one for the Gipper," found himself adrift in Hollywood's swirling social scene. It was within this glamorous yet often superficial whirl of parties, premieres, and industry gatherings that their paths crossed. Hollywood in the early 1950s was a place of reinvention, where stars mingled at venues like the Brown Derby or Kiro's nightclub, exchanging stories of triumphs and heartaches over martinis and cigarette smoke. Doris, with her sharp wit, striking presence, and insider knowledge from her brief acting days, naturally gravitated toward such circles. Reagan, at 38 years old and nursing the wounds of a failed marriage, was drawn to her vibrant energy and understanding demeanor. Their meeting wasn't the stuff of scripted romances. It was organic, born from shared acquaintances in the film world, perhaps at a mutual friend's gathering, or a studio event where conversations flowed easily amid the clink of glasses and the hum of ambition. The relationship that blossomed between them was brief but intense, a flurry of dates and heartfelt letters exchanged during what was undoubtedly a period of emotional recovery for Reagan. His divorce from Wyman, finalized after 8 years of marriage, had been a public spectacle, splashed across tabloids and gossip columns. Wyman, an Oscar-winning actress for her role in Johnny Belinda, 1948, cited Reagan's growing involvement in politics, particularly his anti-communist stance as president of the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, as a contributing factor to their split. Though personal differences and career pressures played significant roles. The union had produced 2 children, Maureen, born in 1941, and Michael, adopted in 1945, adding layers of complexity to Reagan's sense of loss. By the time he met Doris, Reagan was navigating a noticeable career slump. His days as a leading man in A-list pictures were waning, with roles in B-movies like The Last Outpost, 1951, reflecting a shift away from the heroic personas that had defined his earlier success. He was in his late 30s, an age when many actors faced the harsh realities of Hollywood's youth-obsessed industry, and the emotional toll of his divorce left him vulnerable, searching for stability and companionship. Their dates were a whirlwind of simple yet meaningful moments, perhaps dinners at cozy Hollywood eateries like Musso and Frank Grill, where the wood-paneled walls and red leather booths provided a sense of intimacy amid the buzz of celebrity sightings, or drives along the Pacific Coast Highway with the ocean breeze whipping through open-car windows, offering a respite from the pressures of public life. Reagan, known for his affable charm and storytelling prowess, likely regaled Doris with tales from his Illinois childhood, his radio announcing days in Iowa, or his early Warner Brothers contract that launched him into stardom. Doris, in turn, shared her observations of Hollywood's underbelly, her aspirations as a writer, and her unyielding pursuit of the good life. The letters they exchanged added depth to their connection, serving as a bridge during times apart. These missives were personal, revealing a side of Reagan that contrasted with his on-screen confidence. A man grappling with loneliness, career uncertainties, and the ache of a broken family. For Doris, the relationship was a tender exploration of mutual support, where she offered a listening ear and a fresh perspective to a man rebuilding his world. In a moment that underscored the seriousness of their bond, Reagan proposed marriage to Doris, a gesture that spoke volumes about his desire for commitment amid his turmoil. Yet Doris declined, sensing intuitively that he was still on the rebound from his marriage to Wyman. This decision was remarkably bold in an era when marriage often defined a woman's future, providing social status, financial security, and societal approval. The 1950s idealized the nuclear family, with cultural icons like Father Knows Best and advertisements for gleaming kitchen appliances portraying housewives as the epitome of fulfillment. Women were encouraged to prioritize matrimony over careers, with magazines like Good Housekeeping offering tips on pleasing husbands and maintaining spotless homes. Doris's choice to turn down a proposal from a charismatic, well-connected figure like Reagan highlighted her independence and discernment. She wasn't willing to rush into a union that might be built on emotional fragility rather than solid ground. It was a pragmatic yet heartfelt refusal, one that preserved her autonomy and allowed her to focus on her burgeoning writing career. In doing so, She embodied an emerging undercurrent of feminism, even if not overtly political. Women quietly asserting control over their destinies amid the decade's conservative norms. Two letters from this period, penned by Reagan in 1948 and 1949, technically just before their romance but emblematic of his state of mind during that vulnerable time, resurfaced decades later in a poignant twist of fate. In 1988, with Reagan serving as the 40th President of the United States, Doris chose to auction them at Sotheby's, the renowned auction house in New York, known for handling historical artifacts and celebrity memorabilia. The letters fetched $4,400, a sum that, while modest by presidential artifact standards, carried immense sentimental and historical value. One letter, dated April 28, 1948, captured Reagan's raw loneliness. "I'm no good alone," he wrote, lamenting how persistent rain had canceled their planned outing, turning what could have been a joyful evening into a solitary one filled with reflection. The weather metaphor extended to his emotional state, a storm of doubt and isolation that he shared openly with Doris. The other letter expressed deep affection amid his career woes, perhaps touching on the frustrations of contract disputes at Warner Brothers, or the uncertainty of his future in films. These words revealed a vulnerable side of the future leader, a man far removed from the confident, great communicator who would later captivate the nation with speeches like his 1987 call to tear down this wall in Berlin. Instead, here was Ronald Reagan as a heartbroken individual, seeking solace in connection and expressing emotions with a sincerity that contrasted his polished public persona. The buyer, publishing magnate and billionaire Malcolm Forbes, known for his love of historical collectibles and his own flamboyant lifestyle, including hot air balloon adventures and Fabergé egg collections, purchased the letters not for personal gain, but for a gracious gesture. He promptly gifted them to First Lady Nancy Reagan, Reagan's devoted second wife, whom he had married in 1952 after meeting her through SAG. This act closed a poignant chapter with elegance and sensitivity, ensuring the letters returned to the family fold rather than lingering in a stranger's hands. Nancy, who had been Reagan's rock through his political rise and later his battle with Alzheimer's, likely appreciated the gesture as a window into her husband's past, a reminder of the man she had fallen in love with during his own period of reinvention. This romance highlighted Doris's innate allure for powerful figures, drawing them in with her intelligence, charm, and grounded perspective. Yet it carried significant emotional weight, a rare glimpse of young love blossoming in uncertain times, where both parties were navigating personal crossroads. For Reagan, the 1950s were a pivotal decade of transformation. As president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1947 to 1952 and again in 1959, he honed his leadership skills, confronting issues like the Hollywood blacklist and negotiating better contracts for actors amid the rise of television. This role exposed him to politics, anti-communism, and public speaking, laying the groundwork for his shift from Democrat to Republican, his governorship of California in 1967, and ultimately the presidency in 1981. Doris's brief involvement added a layer of humanity to his legacy, portraying him not as the unassailable conservative icon, but as a heartbroken actor seeking connection before his ascent to power. It humanized the narrative of a man often mythologized, showing vulnerability in an era when men were expected to embody stoic strength. For Doris, the interlude was tender and multifaceted, blending the thrill of romance with a dose of pragmatism that defined her approach to life. She later reflected on it with warmth and fondness, noting its brevity but acknowledging its lasting impact on her understanding of relationships and ambition. In interviews and casual recollections, she spoke of Reagan not as a lost opportunity, but as a cherished chapter, one that enriched her perspective without derailing her path. The romance stood out amid her other dates with tycoons and influential men, perhaps oil barons or Wall Street financiers, she encountered in her social climbing research for her book. Those encounters were often strategic or fleeting, but the Reagan story carried a unique intimacy, a rare glimpse of vulnerability from a future icon whose public image would become synonymous with optimism and resolve. The letters auction in 1988, occurring amid Doris's own battle with cancer, was a pragmatic decision that underscored her resilience in the face of personal adversity. By then in her 60s and facing mounting medical costs for treatments that included chemotherapy and hospital stays, Doris turned to this piece of her past as a means of financial support. The auction at Sotheby's, held in a grand room filled with bidders from around the world, sparked headlines in newspapers and magazines, from the New York Times to People, underscoring her unexpected ties to presidential history. Articles detailed the letter's contents, painting Doris as a forgotten figure in Reagan's life story, a woman who had once held his heart during a low point. The publicity brought a mix of nostalgia and scrutiny, but it also highlighted her enduring connection to a pivotal American figure. Ultimately, the romance humanized both Doris and Reagan in profound ways. For Reagan, it revealed him as a man deeply in need of emotional connection, a far cry from the self-assured leader who would champion mourning in America during his 1984 re-election campaign. His words in the letters, "I'm no good alone," echoed a universal sentiment of loneliness, making him relatable despite his later larger-than-life status. For Doris, it showcased her as a discerning woman who prioritized her own path over societal expectations. In a decade defined by rigid gender roles, where housewives were idealized in advertisements for gleaming kitchen appliances like Frigidaire refrigerators or Westinghouse ovens, portraying domesticity as the pinnacle of fulfillment, her choice to decline marriage echoed the stirrings of emerging feminism. Movements like the publication of Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex in English in 1953 began questioning women's subordination, and Doris's decision aligned with this awakening, even if subtly. She chose independence, focusing on her writing and social commentary, rather than rushing into a union that might have confined her. Their paths diverged dramatically after the romance, Reagan marrying Nancy Davis in a small ceremony at the Little Brown Church in the Valley, building a partnership that would sustain him through governorship, presidency, and beyond. Doris continued her ascent in journalism, her life filled with other adventures, books, and columns that dissected high society. Yet the letters preserved a moment of shared fragility, a snapshot of two people finding solace in each other amid life's uncertainties. This chapter in Doris's personal life wasn't just a footnote, it was a testament to her ability to attract and influence remarkable individuals, leaving an indelible mark on history while staying true to herself. The romance, brief as it was, encapsulated the emotional complexities of the 1950s, a time of outward prosperity hiding inner turmoils, and added a layer of depth to both their stories. Journalism, television, and literary career, 1960s to 1980s. The 1960s marked a significant turning point in Doris Lilly's life and career, as she made the bold move from the sun-soaked glamour of Hollywood to the gritty, fast-paced energy of New York City, where she would cement her reputation as a leading voice in journalism. This relocation was more than a geographical shift. It represented a deeper immersion into the world of media and society reporting, allowing her to chronicle the lives of the elite with a level of access and insight that few others could match. New York in the 1960s was a city in constant motion, a melting pot of cultural, political, and social transformations that mirrored the nation's own upheavals. The decade was defined by profound societal changes. The civil rights movement gained momentum with marches led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., culminating in landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which aimed to dismantle segregation and empower African Americans. Simultaneously, the Vietnam War escalated, dividing the country with anti-war protests erupting on college campuses and in city streets, from the teach-ins at the University of Michigan in 1965 to the massive demonstrations outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968. Women's liberation was also taking root, with Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique in 1963 sparking conversations about gender roles, and the formation of the National Organization for Women Now in 1966 advocating for equality in workplaces and homes. Amid this backdrop of flux, Doris found her niche, writing for the New York Daily Mirror, a tabloid-style newspaper known for its bold headlines and focus on urban life, before securing a prominent position at the New York Post. From 1968 to 1978, she penned thrice weekly columns for the Post, becoming a staple in the paper's society pages. Her work was characterized by a sharp wit that cut through pretension, offering readers not just salacious details, but thoughtful commentary on the human elements of high society. Doris's columns transcended mere gossip, evolving into nuanced portraits that captured a society in the midst of profound change. She chronicled the escapades of the elite with an eye for detail that brought their world to life. Socialites, gliding through black-tie galas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, dressed in Yves Saint Laurent gowns and dripping with Harry Winston diamonds, or tycoons navigating corporate scandals in smoke-filled boardrooms while maintaining impeccable public facades. These stories were set against the broader cultural shifts of the era, where the traditional power structures of old money were being challenged by new forces. The jet-set lifestyle, private jets whisking the wealthy to Monte Carlo casinos or Saint-Tropez beaches, clashed with the counterculture rebellion of hippies in Haight-Ashbury or anti-establishment artists in Greenwich Village. Doris deftly balanced these contrasts, perhaps contrasting a Park Avenue penthouse soiree with the raw energy of a Woodstock-like festival, highlighting how even the affluent were touched by the decade's restlessness. Her writing painted vivid, almost cinematic portraits, a debutante's coming-out ball at the Plaza Hotel, where champagne flowed and orchestras played waltzes, juxtaposed with the underlying tensions of generational divides, as younger heirs questioned their inherited privileges amid the rise of youth culture. Through it all, Doris's voice remained engaging and accessible, inviting readers from all walks of life to peek behind the velvet ropes without feeling like outsiders. In addition to her newspaper work, Doris expanded her influence through contributions to a variety of high-profile magazines, each catering to different facets of American life and allowing her to explore diverse angles of society and style. She wrote for Cosmopolitan, then under the editorship of Helen Gurley Brown, starting in 1965, which transformed the magazine into a bold voice for modern women with articles on career, sex, and self-improvement. Doris's pieces there might have delved into the intricacies of dating in high society, blending her signature humor with practical insights. Ladies' Home Journal, a staple for homemakers, with its focus on family, health, and domestic tips, provided a platform for her to discuss the intersection of wealth and everyday life, perhaps profiling how affluent wives balance charity work with household management. McCall's, known for its celebrity interviews and lifestyle advice, allowed her to conduct in-depth conversations with figures from the entertainment world, drawing on her Hollywood roots. Avenue magazine, geared toward New York's upper crust, with coverage of art, fashion, and real estate, suited her expertise in chronicling the city's elite neighborhoods. She also served as beauty editor for Town and Country, one of the oldest and most prestigious lifestyle magazines, founded in 1846 and synonymous with old money elegance. In this role, Doris advised readers on maintaining timeless style amid the era's bold fashion experiments. Mini skirts popularized by Mary Quant in London, go-go boots that danced through discotheques, and the psychedelic prints inspired by the hippie movement. Her columns might have recommended classic Chanel suits for boardroom power or subtle makeup techniques using Revlon products, always emphasizing that true elegance came from confidence rather than trends. Doris's columns masterfully balance the glittering allure of jet-set glamour with the raw energy of counterculture rebellion, creating a dialogue between two worlds that defined the 1960s. On one hand, she evoked the opulence of the international elite, the jet set, a term coined by columnist Igor Cassini to describe those who jetted between continents on Boeing 707s. Attending parties in Rome one night and skiing in Gstaad the next. Think of Aristotle Onassis hosting lavish yacht gatherings in the Mediterranean, or Truman Capote's infamous black and white ball at the Plaza in 1966, where guests like Babe Paley and Frank Sinatra mingled in masks and tuxedos. On the other, Doris acknowledged the counterculture's challenge to establishment norms. Andy Warhol's factory in Manhattan, a silver-foiled studio where artists, drag queens, and superstars like Edie Sedgwick created pop art and underground films that mocked consumerism, versus the staid penthouses of Park Avenue with their doormen and antique furnishings. Warhol's scene represented chaos and creativity, influencing fashion with Campbell's soup can prints and velvet underground music. Doris wove these contrasts into her writing, perhaps noting how a socialite might secretly attend a Warhol happening, blending worlds in unexpected ways. Her ability to dissect these dynamics made her columns essential reading, offering not just entertainment, but a mirror to society's evolving identity. Television further amplified Doris's voice, extending her reach beyond print to the growing medium that was captivating American households. As a commentator on WPIX, a New York-based station affiliated with the independent television network, she dissected celebrity culture with unflinching candor, providing analysis on everything from red carpet fashions to behind-the-scenes scandals. WPIX, known for its local news and variety programming, gave her a platform to engage directly with viewers, perhaps in segments on morning shows or evening talk formats. She appeared on The Mike Douglas Show in 1961, a daytime talk program syndicated nationally and hosted by the affable singer Mike Douglas, who interviewed guests ranging from politicians to entertainers. Billed as self-author or columnist, Doris likely discussed her book How to Meet a Millionaire, or shared gossip from New York's social scene, her poised delivery winning over audiences. Similarly, Girl Talk in 1963, hosted by Virginia Graham, and focusing on women's issues with a panel format, allowed her to converse on topics like beauty, relationships, and celebrity lifestyles. She became a regular on The Merv Griffin Show, which debuted in 1962 and evolved into a staple of afternoon television, known for Griffin's witty interviews with stars like Johnny Carson or Bette Davis. Doris's charm on these shows blended sophistication with relatability. She could discuss a duchess's wardrobe with expertise while cracking jokes that resonated with everyday viewers, her laughter infectious, and her insights grounded in real experience. Moving into the 1970s, Doris navigated a decade fraught with post-Watergate cynicism and economic stagflation, where the idealism of the 1960s gave way to disillusionment and hardship. The Watergate scandal, unfolding from 1972 to 1974, with the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters and culminating in President Richard Nixon's resignation, shattered public trust in institutions, fostering an era of investigative journalism and skepticism. Economic stagflation, high inflation combined with stagnant growth and unemployment, plagued the U.S., with oil crises in 1973 and 1979, driving up gas prices and contributing to recessions. New York City itself teetered on bankruptcy in 1975, its fiscal crisis leading to cuts in services and a rise in crime, epitomized by the Son of Sam killings from 1976 to 1977, where serial killer David Berkowitz terrorized the city with caliber shootings, creating an atmosphere of fear amid blackouts and urban decay. Against this gritty backdrop, Doris's columns for the New York Post delved into the contrasts of city life, exploring how the elite insulated themselves from turmoil while occasionally being touched by it. She focused on Upper East Side opulence, the brownstones and luxury apartments along Fifth Avenue, where residents hosted fundraisers for the Metropolitan Opera or shopped at Bloomingdale's, while acknowledging the broader struggles, perhaps noting how even tycoons felt the pinch of inflation on their caviar budgets. Doris conducted interviews with towering figures like the Onassis family, revealing their human sides in ways that humanize larger-than-life personas. Aristotle Onassis, the Greek shipping magnate who married Jacqueline Kennedy in 1968, was a frequent subject. Doris might have detailed his lavish lifestyle, yachts like the Christina O, equipped with mosaics from ancient ruins and a swimming pool that converted to a dance floor, while uncovering the loneliness and family rivalries that plagued him, such as his strained relationship with son Alexander or the public scrutiny of his marriage to the former First Lady. A favorite quip from Doris encapsulated her wry humor. If it were true that money grew on trees, all my friends would be married to apes, poking fun at the absurdities of wealth while acknowledging its appeal. She openly admitted the elite's occasional shallowness, superficial conversations at cocktail parties about stock tips or vacation spots, but defended their pleasantness with characteristic candor. They smell good, and they eat well and drink good wines, and that's all right. This quote reflected her balanced view, seeing value in the superficial comforts without romanticizing them. Fellow New York Post columnist Cindy Adams, a close contemporary known for her own society scoops, noted Doris's disdain for poverty, a sentiment born from her own climb from modest middle-class roots in California. Adams's observation highlighted Doris's unapologetic embrace of luxury, viewing it as a reward for hard work rather than a moral failing. Her tenure at the Post solidified her as a fixture in journalism, bridging the worlds of old money like the Rockefeller dynasty with their philanthropic empires and vast estates, and new money from Wall Street moguls who amassed fortunes in finance during the go-go years of mergers and acquisitions. Doris's columns often explored this generational shift, noting how inherited wealth from industrial titans gave way to self-made billionaires in banking and real estate, their lifestyles evolving from quiet country clubs to flashy discos. Television continued to humanize her public persona on shows like Guess What?, the 1952 quiz program she had appeared on earlier, but whose format echoed in later guest spots. She debated topics with flair, her insights always grounded in personal experience. As beauty editor for Town and Country, she advised on timeless style amid the 1970s disco fever, sequined Halston dresses twirling under Studio 54's strobe lights, or Farrah Fawcett-inspired feathered hair that captured the era's liberated spirit. The feminist wave of the decade, amplified by Gloria Steinem's launch of Ms. Magazine in 1972 with its focus on women's rights, abortion access, and workplace equality, provided context for Doris's work. Though she rarely delved into overt politics, her columns subtly reflected these dynamics, portraying women in high society as both beneficiaries and challengers of traditional roles, perhaps an heiress launching her own business, or a socialite advocating for women's causes. Doris's columns offered emotional depth that set her apart, revealing the isolation and vulnerabilities behind the facade of wealth, making her a standout in a field increasingly dominated by sensational tabloids, like the National Enquirer, which exploded in popularity during the 1970s with its lurid headlines on celebrity scandals and UFO sightings. While the Enquirer thrived on shock value, stories of Elvis Presley's drug struggles or Elizabeth Taylor's marriages, Doris opted for nuance, exploring how affluence could breed loneliness, as in the case of a magnate whose vast fortune couldn't mend family rifts. This approach influenced the evolution of gossip journalism, paving the way for more empathetic reporting in outlets like Vanity Fair. Doris Lilly's books evolved alongside these decades, each one peeling back the layers of wealth's facade and adapting to the cultural currents of the time. In 1965, How to Make Love in 5 Languages introduced a playful cosmopolitan flair to her oeuvre, teaching readers romantic phrases in French, Spanish, Italian, German, and Portuguese, simple expressions like je t'aime or te quiero, delivered with tips on pronunciation and context. The book reflected the burgeoning sexual revolution of the 1960s, sparked by the introduction of the birth control pill in 1960, which empowered women to explore relationships without fear of unwanted pregnancy, and the swinging 60s freedoms, epitomized by London's Carnaby Street fashion and the free love ethos of communes. Doris infused it with humor and light-hearted advice, appealing to readers eager to embrace new liberties in an era when Hugh Hefner's Playboy magazine normalized discussions of sexuality, and films like Alfie, 1966, starring Michael Caine, portrayed modern dating with candidness. Rather than being explicit, the book was teasing and fun, suggesting ways to add international spice to flirtations, perhaps drawing from Doris's own travels or encounters in New York's diverse social scene. In 1970, those fabulous Greeks, Onassis, Niarchos, and Livanos, delved deeply into the opulent yet turbulent lives of Greek shipping magnates, focusing on figures like Aristotle Onassis, whose whirlwind marriage to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis in 1968 on the island of Scorpios captivated global headlines and symbolized the intersection of American royalty and foreign wealth. Doris humanized these titans, detailing fierce business rivalries, Onassis versus Stavros, Niarchos in tanker fleets and oil deals, and family dramas within the Livanos clan, whose shipping empire provided the foundation for such fortunes. She explored the loneliness behind the luxury. Vast yachts like Onassis's Christina O, with its bar stools covered in whale foreskin, and mosaics from ancient sites, serving as floating palaces for parties with guests like Winston Churchill or Maria Callas, yet masking personal tragedies such as Onassis's loss of his son Alexander in a 1973 plane crash. Based on exclusive interviews conducted in Athens or Monaco, the book captured the 1970s fascination with global tycoons amid the oil crises triggered by the 1973 Yom Kippur War and OPEC embargo, which skyrocketed fuel prices and reshaped economies. Doris offered a nuanced look at power's cost, portraying these men not as caricatures of excess, but as complex individuals driven by ambition, grief, and legacy. Co-authoring Glamour Girl in 1977 with Robin Moore, a novelist known for The Green Berets, 1965, Doris examined the intoxicating allure and hidden pitfalls of fame, drawing richly on her experiences from Hollywood's golden age and New York's bustling media world. The book was set against the backdrop of the 1970s hedonistic excess. Nights at Studio 54, the legendary disco opened in 1977 by Steve Rubel and Ian Schrager, where celebrities like Bianca Jagger rode in on a white horse and danced under glittering lights amid cocaine-fueled revelry, and the sobering fallout from Watergate, which eroded faith in icons and institutions. Doris explored celebrities' emotional toll. The rush of public adoration contrasted with private struggles like addiction, broken relationships, or the pressure to maintain perfection. Chapters might have profiled archetypes inspired by real figures. A young starlet navigating predatory producers, akin to the Me Too revelations decades later, or a socialite crumbling under scrutiny. The narrative resonated with readers grappling with a decade's disillusionment, from the end of Vietnam in 1975 to the economic malaise under President Jimmy Carter, offering empathy for those in the limelight while cautioning against its illusions. In 1984, How to Meet a Billionaire served as a clever update to her debut, reflecting the dramatic economic shifts of the Reagan era. With a wry nod to inflation and changing wealth standards, she wrote, "$1 million isn't much money these days. You can't even get a decent house for that," highlighting how the 1980s Reaganomics, tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation, and a stock market boom elevated billionaires as the new pinnacle of success. The book advised on snagging these ultra-rich catches in emerging hubs like Silicon Valley, where tech pioneers like Steve Jobs were building empires with Apple or Wall Street, amid the junk bond frenzy led by figures like Michael Milken. Blending pragmatism with her signature wit, Doris suggested strategies like networking at venture capital events or tech conferences, dressing in power suits from designers like Donna Karan, and mastering conversations about stocks or startups. It cemented her as a chronicler of wealth's evolution, influencing modern self-help books and celebrity biographies that dissect fame's mechanics. Each of Doris's works showcased her remarkable adaptability, merging incisive reportage with genuine empathy to create books that were more than mere guides. They were cultural snapshots, revealing the fragile human side of privilege amid turbulent times. From the sexual liberation of the 1960s to the excess and introspection of the 1970s and 1980s, her publications captured society's pulse, offering readers not just entertainment but profound insights into the contradictions of aspiration and reality. Through her journalism, television appearances, and books, Doris became a bridge between worlds, her voice enduring as a testament to thoughtful storytelling in an ever-changing landscape. In her later years, as the vibrant energy of the 1960s and 1970s gave way to the more introspective and economically turbulent 1980s, Doris Lilly continued to navigate the world of high society with her characteristic blend of wit, insight, and unflinching honesty. By this time, she had firmly established herself as a chronicler of the elite, her columns and books serving as windows into a realm that fascinated and sometimes perplexed the average American. Living in New York City, the epicenter of her professional life, Doris found herself in close proximity to some of the most iconic figures from Hollywood's golden age. Notably, she was neighbors with the legendary actress Joan Crawford, a woman whose public image of iron-willed discipline and glamour masked deep personal turmoils that had long been whispered about in industry circles. Crawford, born Lucille Fay LeSueur in 1904 or 1905, much like Doris, her birth year was subject to some debate, had risen from humble beginnings to become one of MGM's biggest stars in the 1930s and 1940s, with roles in films like Mildred Pierce, 1945, for which she won an Academy Award, showcasing her as a fierce, self-sacrificing mother. Yet behind the scenes, Crawford's life was marked by multiple marriages, battles with alcoholism, and a notoriously strict parenting style that later came under scrutiny in her daughter Christina's controversial memoir, Mommy Dearest, 1978, which painted a picture of emotional abuse and obsession with cleanliness and order. Doris, living nearby, perhaps in the same upscale apartment building on the Upper East Side or an adjacent brownstone, had the opportunity to observe Crawford in a more private light, witnessing the contrasts between her polished exterior and the hidden pains that plagued her until her death in 1977 from pancreatic cancer. Their shared neighborhood fostered a connection rooted in mutual understanding of the entertainment world's demands, where public personas often concealed private struggles. This neighborly bond culminated in a heartfelt tribute that became Doris's final contribution to the world of journalism. Her last column for Avenue magazine, a publication dedicated to the lifestyles of New York's affluent, was published posthumously in October 1991. In it, Doris reminisced about Crawford with a mix of admiration and empathy, nodding to their shared experiences in a world defined by glamour's intoxicating highs and its often overlooked hidden pains. She might have described Crawford's legendary work ethic, rising at dawn for exercise routines, meticulously planning every aspect of her image, from her signature shoulder-padded suits to her flawless makeup, that propelled her to stardom but also isolated her from genuine connections. Doris's piece likely touched on the actress's later years, marked by reclusiveness and health issues, yet underscored the resilience that defined both women. This column was more than a mere obituary or memory. It was a poignant reflection on the fragile beauty of lives lived in the public eye, where success came at the cost of personal sacrifices. For Doris, writing about Crawford was a way to honor a kindred spirit, someone who, like herself, had climbed from modest origins to rub shoulders with the powerful, all while grappling with the emotional toll of that ascent. Doris's reflections on wealth during these years were particularly telling, offering a window into her evolved perspective after decades immersed in the upper echelons. In interviews and her writings, she often remarked with a blend of candor and affection, "They are sometimes shallow, but they are pleasant, and they smell good, and they eat well and drink good wines, and that's all right." This quote encapsulated her nuanced view of the elite, a class she had chronicled extensively but never fully idealized. They referred to the tycoons, socialites, and celebrities whose lives she dissected, acknowledging their occasional superficiality in conversations that skimmed the surface of topics like fashion trends or vacation spots. yet appreciating the sensory pleasures they embodied. The scent of expensive colognes like Chanel No. 5, the taste of gourmet meals at restaurants like Le Cirque, and the clink of crystal glasses filled with vintage Bordeaux. It was a defense of sorts, not of excess, but of the human comfort found in such luxuries. Especially for someone like Doris, who had risen from a middle-class background where such indulgences were rare. Her friend and fellow New York Post columnist Cindy Adams, known for her own sharp-tongued society coverage, quipped that Doris was never fond of poverty, a light-hearted but pointed nod to her ascent from the modest roots of Santa Monica to the pinnacles of Manhattan's social scene. Adams's observation highlighted Doris's unapologetic embrace of the finer things, viewing them as hard-earned rewards rather than moral failings, a mindset shaped by her early observations of class divides and her determination to transcend them. In her later years, Doris continued her writing endeavors with remarkable tenacity despite mounting health struggles that began to shadow her daily life. The 1980s were a decade of contrast for her. Professionally, she remained active, updating her earlier works and contributing to magazines, but personally, she faced the physical and emotional challenges of aging and illness. One notable event that bridged her past and present was the 1988 auction of the 2 personal letters from Ronald Reagan, dating back to their brief romance in the late 1940s. By this time, Reagan had become the 40th President of the United States, serving from 1981 to 1989 and embodying the era's conservative resurgence with policies like Reaganomics, which emphasized tax cuts and deregulation. The auction at Sotheby's, a prestigious venue for historical artifacts, fetched $4,400 for the letters, a sum that, while modest, carried symbolic weight. The proceeds were likely used to aid her ongoing battle with cancer, covering medical expenses such as treatments, doctor visits, and perhaps alternative therapies in an era when healthcare costs were rising amid debates over insurance reforms. The sale closed a deeply personal chapter for Doris, transforming private mementos into a practical resource during a time of need, and it garnered media attention that revisited her connection to one of America's most iconic leaders. It was a pragmatic decision, reflective of her lifelong blend of sentiment and sensibility, ensuring that echoes of her youth supported her in her twilight years. Later years, death and legacy, 1980s to 1991. Doris Lilly passed away on October 9, 1991, in New York City at the age of 64, succumbing to the cancer that had plagued her final years. Her death marked the end of an era for society journalism, as she had been a vibrant voice in a field that bridged the gap between the glamorous and the genuine. The news of her passing was met with tributes in major outlets, from the New York Times to the Los Angeles Times, which lauded her wit, insight, and ability to humanize the often impenetrable world of the wealthy. Obituaries painted her as a trailblazer who combined sharp observation with empathy, a woman who had lived the stories she told and brought authenticity to every piece she wrote. Friends and colleagues remembered her not just for her professional achievements, but for her personal warmth, her quick laugh in social settings, and her unyielding curiosity about people from all walks of life. Her funeral, likely a private affair in keeping with her understated elegance, drew those who had known her through decades of New York's social whirl, a quiet farewell to a life lived boldly. Her influence endures far beyond her lifetime, weaving its way into the fabric of modern gossip journalism and celebrity culture. Outlets like TMZ, with its rapid-fire reporting on Hollywood scandals From red carpet mishaps to legal dramas, Vanity Fair, known for its in-depth profiles that blend glamour with investigative depth, and People magazine, which popularized human interest stories about stars' personal lives, all owe a subtle debt to Doris's pioneering blend of entertainment and human insight. She was among the first to treat society reporting not as mere titillation, but as a lens on broader human experiences, exposing the vulnerabilities beneath the veneer of success. Doris captured mid-century America's deep-seated obsession with aspiration, the post-war boom's promise that hard work and savvy could lead anyone to the top. Embodied in icons like the Kennedys or the Rockefellers, while unflinchingly exposing its hidden costs, the profound loneliness that could accompany luxury, where vast estates and private jets offered isolation rather than connection, the fragility of fortunes that could crumble with a market crash or personal scandal. Her brief romance with Ronald Reagan added a poignant footnote to his legacy, humanizing a president often remembered for his optimistic rhetoric and Cold War victories by showing his youthful vulnerability, a man once adrift and seeking solace before becoming a symbol of American resilience. Her lessons continue to resonate in today's world, where influencers and billionaires dominate headlines, reminding us of life's inherent contradictions, the seductive allure of wealth that often masks deeper pains, like the emotional voids in opulent lives or the pressures of maintaining public perfection. Doris taught that true beauty lies in embracing imperfection, in finding joy in the simple pleasures amid grandeur, and in approaching others with empathy rather than envy. She demystified the elite without demonizing them, urging readers to reflect on their own pursuits, whether chasing millions or meaningful connections, and to recognize the shared humanity that binds us all. Her sparkle endures, not as a faded relic, but as a vibrant thread in the tapestry of American dreams, inspiring generations to look beyond the surface and appreciate the complex stories that shape us. In an age of social media where lives are curated to perfection, Doris's legacy serves as a gentle reminder that behind every glittering facade lies a tale of triumph, trial, and the enduring quest for fulfillment.